How you respond to rules and regulation tells us a lot about your communication style. Today, we're going to be talking about the compliant communication style and learning how to do our best job at communicating with the C style. Hi, I'm Dale Fallon, and welcome to Live at the Gym, where we work out our communication muscles so we can improve the quality of our conversations. Before we meet today's guest, Evan Wabrick, let's talk about the C communication style. This is the 5th session in our DISC model series, and I invite you to go back to the YouTube channel so you can binge watch all 5. It'll be a great Friday night for you. The DISC model helps you to understand and become more effective when you communicate with the humans, and the C stands for compliant. The C is an introverted and task-oriented style, and it reflects a person's relationship with rules and regulations. And you recognize the C in conversation by steady and consistent, both in pace and volume, a direct and logical tone, not a lot of emotional variation, very little physical movement when communicating. The C styles are methodical and cautious, making them excellent analysts. And here's a fun fact. The C style makes up approximately 31% of the world's population. So with that as our starting point, I'd like to introduce our guest member, Evan Wabrick. Evan is a tax manager at SEK CPAs and Advisors. He's a Shippensburg University grad with a bachelor's in accounting and an MBA, and he serves on the company's Emerging Professionals Committee and Consulting Task Force, and chairs the firm's SALT Committee. And he's also celebrating his son Logan's 6-month birthday today. So Evan, welcome to Live at the Gym, and tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe about your son, and also what is the SALT Committee?
Thanks for having me, Dale. So as Dale mentioned, my name is Evan Wabrick. I'm a tax manager with SEK CPAs and Advisors, primarily in our firm's Carlisle office. So I help primarily business owners of small to medium-sized businesses and individuals with tax compliance and tax planning strategies to help minimize their tax liability as much as possible. As Dale mentioned, I'm on the firm's Emerging Professionals Committee, and I chair our firm's SALT Committee. So SALT stands for state and local taxes. So what we do as a committee is we are primarily an internal resource for our coworkers throughout all of our offices, with ensuring that we are compliant with multi-state tax returns for our business clients that have multi-state tax obligations and filings. And then we're also looking at sales and use tax implications to make sure that, one, our clients are filing appropriate sales and use tax returns, and potentially assessing whether or not they might have exposure in other states that they're selling their products or services to their clients. Dale mentioned we have a 6-month-old son, Logan. He's 6 months today. He was actually named after Wolverine. After my wife and I saw the movie Logan, we just liked the name. And it's been a good road so far being a new dad.
Well, congratulations to Logan. And hopefully his life is less exciting than Wolverine's life is, at least in those ways.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, Evan, that on the SALT Committee, has there been a lot of people doing more multi-state work over the past years, or is that a pretty stable thing?
Absolutely. And we've seen it as a whole throughout our internal client base. And just with, I think, COVID, how that's implemented businesses to work more remotely, do more business online. You're seeing more transactions being done across multi-state borders, where it might be less common for those traditional brick and mortar stores to exist.
Yeah.
And with people doing business online and through e-commerce, you have implications that you need to be more cognizant of how you're selling across the board. And with that comes complications for sales and use tax and income tax as well.
So a lot of rules and regulations that people need to understand and follow. So you're pretty tight with them.
Correct. So we want to make sure that people know the implications of what they're doing on the forefront to ensure that they are, one, being compliant, because if you do not file the proper paperwork, proper returns, statute of limitations will not apply in that regard. And a state, if they want to, could go back for many years in determining when you actually started business in that state. And sometimes we've seen penalties and interest be pretty hefty in that regard. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah. So in terms of communicating with your clients, Evan, you've gotten a kind of a deep dive into communicating with styles this year. How has that impacted your approach with your clients or with your coworkers? What are you recognizing, and how has it changed?
Yeah, so I've been doing the communication gym with Dale since about May now. And really main benefit for me, it's one, it's made me more confident in having conversations with clients, but then two, really able to recognize who you're talking to. And from there, you're able to adapt your style accordingly to, I think, have the best interaction with that potential client or client. And really makes the conversation more meaningful when you're able to adapt to their style. And I think from there, you're able to get your point across a lot better, and it's more effective.
Good. And when we're dealing with today's topic is the C communication style. So the introverted, task oriented, more methodical kind of step by step. I see your wry smile there.
That's primarily a stereotypical accountant, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. So you notice that in the office frequently, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think majority of accountants are detail oriented, and that's where in more reserve and introverted, I think, as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of this style comes into play, where you're being pretty steady. I like to show some emotion. You don't have to be as straight faced as possible, but I sometimes with trying to explain a problem or a situation to a particular client, some people might want to have as much detail as possible. And I think that's where this style can come into play if it suits that other person.
Yeah. With the C, that they want all the detail, to take the time step by step to go through and analyze how everything fits together, not only now, but also in the future to the greatest degree they can.
Correct.
Do you find it interesting, or have you seen yourself recognizing in the client side when there's a big difference there? Because that's
absolutely. Yeah. And I actually had a situation like that occurred probably a couple weeks ago on a Teams call I had with a new client. Their particular situation was they had been granted some stock options with their company. So I was trying to explain to them how that works from a taxation standpoint. And there's two different methods on how you can get awarded stock. It can be awarded to you through your compensation on your W-2, or you can flat out buy it from the company itself. And when I was trying to go through the two methods with one person, it seemed that I was providing a little bit too much detail to them. It seemed to be a little overwhelming to them. And so we had to take a little bit of a step back from that, because at the end of the day, they didn't really want to know all the details with it. They just wanted to know, hey, what's my tax implications from this?
Yeah.
So we kind of went another direction with it, which is fine. But then I had another situation earlier in the summer, another client, stock options as well, but they wanted to know more of the detail about it. How does that work? What are my options regarding that? So it just really depends upon that person that you're talking to.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great example you used with the first one too, because when you're giving too much of the detail, the D style specifically, the extroverted and task oriented,
absolutely,
they get weighed down. They're like, I need, give me the top 3 bullet points so I can make a decision.
And in that regard, she actually seemed to be a little bit overwhelmed at first with that. So that's why we just kind of ended that part of it, didn't really go into any more detail, and just kind of moved forward with the meeting.
Yeah. Well, that's a great transition for us to go into our exercise portion for today. And what I want to do for the exercise is to think in terms of a meeting that you've got going forward. If you've got a meeting coming up with a high C communication style, what are some of the ways that you would prepare? What's your thinking process to get into?
Yeah, so actually, I'll give you an example of one I had last week, actually. So it was a tax planning meeting with a client where we had to go into their QuickBooks file as of September 30th, make some corresponding journal entries to clean up their books a little bit. That way I had a pretty good understanding of where their operations were as of 9/30, and I can project out the remaining 3 months because ultimately that's what they're going to get taxed on, kind of annualize out. So what I did in that meeting was I literally went through each approach that I did to get to that number that ultimately is going to be their bottom line on their business income.
Yep.
So we went through all the details of how I got to the 9/30 number corrections, how I annualized out, here's my kind of book the tax reconciliation from
Yep.
looking at their book income to their taxable income, and then looking at how then that transpired on their 1040 and included that with all their other income sources. So we kind of went through line by line of how I got that number
Yep.
for them, which translated into their tax liability.
Yeah. Perfect. As you're talking, I'm going back to math class in middle school, right? Show your work, show your work, show your work.
Because I want to show them exactly, here's what I did, here's how it translates to you, here's your income, ultimately how it affects you for your tax liability standpoint on the return.
Yep. So if you're thinking ahead with the C, it is a planted question, but do you add more time to it? You think you're going to need a little bit more time, right?
Absolutely, because you want to try to be, in my opinion, as detailed as possible so that you can, you're explaining maybe not every little thing, but as much as you can to really try to help them understand this is what I did. Here's why. Here's how it affected you.
Yep.
And a lot of people who are, that's their main style. That's what they're comfortable with. They want as much detail as you can, so they understand thoroughly what they're looking at.
And that's a great transition too, because those things you listed are what happened to get us here. Yes. As opposed to what's going forward. And when we switch, and so my next question, if you're preparing for the D meeting, right? You're preparing for someone who's a D, what would your approach be? How would it be different?
So really, we can kind of scratch everything that I kind of did, and they want to know the bottom line. They just want to know, what's my tax?
Yeah.
And they don't care what you did to get to that number. They just want to know the tax.
Yeah. Well, I'll put an asterisk on that as a D. I'll defend us a little bit. We care. We want to know it's right, but I don't want to be involved in it, right? I want to trust.
They trust you that everything that you've done to arrive at that number is correct.
Yep.
We're doing some estimates, so it's not 100% accurate.
Yep.
We're coming up with the best number that we can with the information we have.
Yep.
So they're trusting you at the end of the day that you're doing your due diligence as a professional and letting us know, hey, here's what I need to prepare for.
Yep.
What can we then do to minimize that as much as possible then? And do we have to plan accordingly for some payments?
Yep. And that's in my mind when I prepare for those meetings too. The introverted styles want a little bit more of how we got here, the back end, what we've gotten to this place, and then we can go forward. Where the extroverted styles are like, okay, we're here. Let's go. Let's move forward into the future. Tell me what I need to do and what I need.
And a lot of times with those meetings that you have more of a D style that you're working with, they tend to be a little bit shorter because you don't have to go into explaining all the minutia as you would with the C style.
Yeah. Well, they should be, because the D is going to get annoyed after 20 minutes, right? We've been here too long. I've got other things to do.
That's right.
Great. Well, Evan, I appreciate the exercise going through, and it's a great example of thinking and being proactively prepared to handle different types of styles. And I want to encourage our audience and our other people out there on LinkedIn to practice with these varying styles. Don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. Just keep working on the style differences so that you can improve. The C style, again, quick recap, is introverted and task-oriented. Take your time, prepare your approach, and focus on the detail. And again, thank you, Evan. We appreciate you being here. I want to invite our audience to join us here on Thursdays on LinkedIn for more communication workouts. Make sure that you grab your complimentary playbook page in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our blog so that you can get more communication tips and exercises. Thank you again, Evan.
Thank you.